smells good though. Well, hi Susan. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the decor in here today. Can you tell me something about the ladder behind you?
Okay, well, got the smoke here. I'm burning some sage here. The ladder behind me is, back in the 80s, I suppose, people thought it was cool to decorate their houses in the Southwest design. So one of the things that they do is they get a Kiva ladder. This is like a reproduction of a Kiva ladder. And a Kiva, and then they would hang blankets and things like that from it, just to decorate the house. This is really going to go all over me. A Kiva ladder was originally what people would use to take them from, say, the surface, the ground level surface of where the village was, and a kiva was a hole dug in the ground, and people would go down. They'd go down into the hole by using the kiva ladder, and they would sit around. Then there'd be a fire, and this is in the Southwest. Some of the Southwest tribes, they go sit around a fire and meditate and connect with maybe the ancestors or whoever it was that they were connecting with in the spirit world. So I thought it was kind of a nice idea to have a Kiva ladder here, and know that in the mediation space, as I'm doing the Native Family Team Meeting facilitation, that connecting with the spirit world is part of the things that we do as we're doing mediation and as we're getting along, doing the things that we need to do for mediation. I also offer, when I'm doing Native Family Team Meeting facilitation, if the families would like to, say, burn sage at the beginning of the meeting, I have my shell bowl that we could use for that, if they would like to use that. I also have a braid of sweetgrass here, and I have a talking stick, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So some people would like to use that. Some people might have a spiritual leader that they would like to have come to the meeting, and we can do that. Most people don't know what that is. They don't. They're not following any kind of particular tradition, but that's always going to be available here at my office to do that. Also, something that we could use if people would like is a talking stick, and here's the talking stick that I have. I bought this in Cherokee, North Carolina. It's a turkey feather, I think, back there, and there's a carved face in here, also a carved feather down here, and the carved eagle, I think, at the top here. And on the back, and I didn't see this when I bought it, on the back there's a snake carved into there, snake head. And when I got it back to my room where I was staying, I was staying with a friend of mine, and we were staying there in Cherokee for a few days, just kind of visiting. And I brought it back to the room, and I was showing her, and we both saw that, and I was like, well, why would they carve a snake on the back of there? And we thought about it for a minute, and she said, well, when you're telling a story, when you're speaking, and you're sharing from the heart with someone else, what's actually happening is it's kind of like when you're a snake and you're shedding a skin, and you're wiggling out of your skin. And so by the end of the time that you've told the story, you're a new person. You've lost that old skin, and now you're new. So I thought that was really, really appropriate for me to own a talking stick that would be symbolic of shedding the old and transforming into the new, which is already there within. What else I have here in my office? I bought some things at the Goodwill store. There's a couple of paintings. The one over here is of the Hopi Kachina. One over there is of 4 Native Hawaiian stories of the ancestors, some of their creation stories. And a lady on horseback. Out in the front office there's a picture of an Indian child, and if you look at the picture real closely, you can see in the background I think there's an eagle, and there's some horses and some different things, but you have have to look and see those things. They're kind of hidden pictures. When I first started, when I was at the courtroom, I was a court reporter for 20 years, and I realized after a while that really the court system didn't work for people. What I was seeing was people would come into court, they'd be all excited, yes, we're going to have our day in court, yay, this is going to be awesome, and we're going to win, and us versus them, and I've got my attorney here, they've got their attorney here, our side's going to beat their side. And then we've got the judge there, and he's going to decide for us, and we've got the jury, we're going to get the jury on our side, and so I'd hear them. I'd be setting up my machine, and I'd get the exhibits, and I'd be marking the exhibits, and people would be kind of filtering into the courtroom as the day is getting underway. And I'd hear the one side whispering to their attorney, oh, this is going to happen, and they're kind of getting out their strategy and getting all that laid out. And I was just kind of watching and listening, and then we would go through the whole court process. They call the jurors in, and we'd select a jury, and then they'd give evidence, and this would go over maybe a whole day or many days. It could be many day long trial. And at the end of the trial, then the attorneys make their summary statements, and they try to convince the jury that their side is the best. They told the best story. And then they send the case to the jury, and the jury deliberates for however long the jury is going to deliberate on this case. And then they come back and they deliver their verdict, and then everybody leaves the courtroom, and it's just me and the two sides and their attorneys. And I'm trying to get everything then tied, all the loose ends tied up, and put away my machine, and put away my discs and my paper and the exhibits, get all the exhibits marked and in order and all that kind of stuff. So I'd be listening as just kind of off the cuff, kind of out of the corner of my ear, I'd be listening to the people saying, man, that just didn't go the way I thought it would, man. They didn't understand me. I did not get my way. Man, all that money, man, I don't understand this. So this happened so many times. I could definitely see that court was just not working for people. And so after like the 10th time or so that I saw this pattern kept happening, the thought crossed my mind, well, what does work for people then? What does? How? If it's not court, if it's not the judge in charge, and the two sides against each other, and people, us versus them, well, what would work for people? So about that time, that was in the mid-90s, and I thought it was very unrelated. I found myself on the Rosebud Reservation, quite by accident. One of those accidents that's, it's not an accident. And I found out that I had no knowledge whatsoever about Indian history, and I became consumed. I wanted to find out as much as I could find out about Indian history. So I bought books, and I would read through the book and just inhale it, and find another book, inhale it, find another book, inhale it. And I was inhaling everything I could listen to, read, watch videos, movies, whatever it was. I was just consumed. I had to learn more about Indian history and find out what this was, why I was so consumed about this. So it's been a passion of mine to learn as much as I could about Native history. And then when I got into the conflict resolution program, and part of it was going to be to find out about Native conflict resolution, I thought that was really interesting. And now maybe I get my question answered. I didn't really make that connection right away that was what was going to be happening, but it eventually occurred to me that I was getting my own question answered here. So as time went on, I met a potter from the east part of the country around North Carolina. He told me about one of his tribes. He was Catawba. One of his tribe's old conflict resolution techniques that he just kind of ran across by accident in the process of being a potter. And he said that back in the day, when two people would be in conflict with each other, they would contact the mediator, who was a potter at that time. That was who they'd go to. They'd go to the potter, and the potter then would go dig clay especially for this situation. and would find out how many parties there are to the conflict. And let's say there are 7 parties. There are 7 people involved in this conflict. So they would make a pipe bowl to hold tobacco, and there would be 7 openings in the bowl for the tobacco. So the potter would make this specifically for this conflict, and then they'd bake it in the sun and fire it in the heat, and so that it would stand up and actually be a pottery bowl. And then they would make the potter would then make the wooden stems that people would smoke with. So they would put all that together, and it would take a couple of weeks. It would take a while for this to be created. And then the day of the ceremony would come, and everybody would come together in the same room, and it would be kind of a low, kind of a hut kind of a thing. They didn't have teepees. They had small lodges, kind of like you might think of a modern-day sweat lodge, but this would be from the eastern tribes, so there would be branches and things like that, but it would be kind of low built to the ground. And people would come into this, and everybody would be bringing their tobacco. And what they would do is they would put their conflict, their worry, their sorrow, their whatever it was, they put those emotions into the tobacco. And how you do that, you just transfer from your heart into the tobacco. And everybody would take their tobacco and put it into the center bowl. And so you've got 7 people putting their heartache into the bowl, into the tobacco in the center bowl. And then the mediator's there, the mediator lights the tobacco, says whatever has to be said to get this ceremony going. And then they would all smoke together, all at once. They would smoke, and then they would watch the smoke rise. Watch the smoke rise in this little hut that they were sitting in. And they'd watch it. And if the smoke were hanging together, and it was all kind of like one unit, then they would go ahead and do the mediation session. They would go ahead and do the session. And then they'd watch, and if the smoke was just all over the place, it wasn't hanging together, then they'd say, oh, well, our minds are all stirred up. We can't do this today. This is not the kind of a day for doing this kind of mediation or this kind of work today. So then they'd go, and they would come back on a day when their minds were more at one. So